Silence reveals the fears we try hardest to avoid, and in Salem County, that silence is thick enough to feel like a living thing. It hangs in the air, clinging to the trees, seeping through the cracked windows of abandoned houses, and settling into the soil like an ancient curse. When people walk through this place, their footsteps vanish into the quiet, as if the ground itself is swallowing sound. Most never realize that this silence is not emptiness. It is a mirror. It reflects everything you try to hide from yourself, everything you hope no one ever notices, everything you pretend does not exist. The silence is a truth teller, and truth has always been far more terrifying than ghosts. In Salem County, the quiet follows you like a shadow. At first, it feels peaceful, almost calming, but that is how fear disguises itself. It waits. It watches. And when you are finally alone with no noise to distract you, no voices to guide you, no comfort to cling to, the silence presses in and shows you what lies beneath your surface. Your hidden anxieties, your suppressed failures, your unspoken dreams that you buried because chasing them felt too risky. The silence of this place does not create fear. It uncovers it, peeling it back layer by layer, until you can see what has always been there. Most people run from silence because it forces them to face the parts of themselves they would rather keep in the dark. That is why so many flee the moment they step into Salem County and feel that unsettling stillness brushing against their skin. They think the silence is haunted, that something supernatural lurks there, waiting to leap from the shadows. But the only thing haunting them is themselves, their regrets, their fears, their excuses. The silence simply makes them impossible to ignore. Yet, this is exactly why the silence is powerful. It strips away the noise of life, the excuses, the distractions, the fake confidence, and leaves you with the raw truth of who you are and what you really want. Think about it. How often do we fill our lives with sound just to avoid listening to our own thoughts? How often do we drown out our doubts with music, conversations, scrolling, anything to avoid the quiet? Salem County's dead silence becomes a test. It asks you whether you are brave enough to face yourself, whether you can stand alone in the eerie stillness and confront the fears whispering in your mind, the ones you've buried under years of pretending to be strong. The silence does not judge you. It simply reveals you in that suffocating quiet. Something else happens too. After the first wave of fear, after the uncomfortable truth rises, after the shadows of your own thoughts stretch long across your mind, you begin to see clarity. You start to recognize how much of your fear was built from illusion. How many of your limits were created from belief alone, not reality. How many opportunities you walked away from because you were terrified of what the silence would tell you if you tried and failed. In this haunted stillness, you realize that fear has always been your most committed ghost. One that never leaves unless confronted. As you stand there, surrounded by stillness heavy enough to feel like a presence, you start to notice something unexpected. The silence does not want to trap you. It wants to transform you. It wants to peel back everything false so that only strength remains. It forces you to acknowledge the fears you've avoided, but in doing so, it gives you power over them. The moment you identify a fear, it loses its ability to control you. The moment you speak its name, even inside your own mind, it begins to shrink. Salem County's silence gives you the rare chance to look fear directly in the face without distraction, without noise, without escape, and slowly, the silence shifts. It becomes less of a threat and more of an ally. It becomes a space where courage can grow, because courage is born not when fear is absent, but when fear is understood. Inside that stillness, you begin to feel your heartbeat differently. Stronger, more determined, more aware. You feel your breathing deepen, steadying as the initial terror fades. And then you begin to hear something else, your own voice, the one you've ignored for years. The one buried beneath noise, expectations, and self-doubt. The silence reveals that your voice has been waiting for you to finally listen, to finally acknowledge that you are capable of far more than you ever believed. In Salem County, the silence does not destroy you. It exposes you, challenges you, and strengthens you until you realize that the very fears the silence uncovers are the same fears you must defeat to grow. If you want, I can now expand Keynote Note 2 into 700 words with the same deep horror, motivational atmosphere. The darkness in Salem County doesn't just seep from its abandoned barns or its hollow-eyed windows. It crawls from the very soil, rising like a breath that refuses to fade. When you stand here, surrounded by the quiet roads and the endless fog, you begin to understand that the real shadows are not the ones cast by trees or crumbling houses. They are the ones that sit deep inside you, waiting for a moment of hesitation to grow larger. The darkness of this place is only a reflection of the doubts you've carried for years, doubts you tried to bury under routine excuses and the comforting glow of distractions. But when all the noise fades, when the world around you falls into dead silence, those doubts rise to the surface, louder than ever. Salem County becomes a mirror, showing you everything you've avoided confronting, the failures you replay too often, the dreams you've abandoned too quickly, the potential you've convinced yourself is impossible to reach. It reminds you that darkness itself has never been the enemy. It is your belief in its power that paralyzes you. When you walk through the unlit paths here, your footsteps echo, and suddenly you're aware of every tiny sound your fear magnifies. You begin to understand how doubt works the same way. It doesn't scream at you. It doesn't leap out with claws and teeth. It whispers. It waits. It feeds off the silence between your decisions. Every time you choose the easy path, every time you say, maybe later, every time you stay where it feels familiar, even though your heart begs you to move forward, you strengthen that inner shadow. And soon, your doubt becomes so comfortable, so familiar, that you mistake it for your identity. That's how Salem's darkness traps people. Not physically, but mentally. It convinces them that progress is dangerous, that ambition is foolish, that standing still is safer than walking into the unknown. But the most terrifying thing about this place is not the ghost stories, not the rumors of voices in empty houses, not the flicker of movement you think you see in the corner of your eye. It's the realization that the real horror has been living inside you all along. Salem County teaches you something powerful. The moment you stop running from your darkness is the moment you reclaim control of it. When you stand still in this county, feeling the cold wind wrap around you like unseen fingers, you learn that fear loses its grip the moment you decide to face it. There is strength in acknowledging your shadows, not denying them, not pretending they don't exist, but standing eye to eye with them and saying, I'm moving forward anyway. The darkness here becomes a training ground, forcing you to confront what you've avoided. It pushes you to admit the truth. The opportunities you've missed were never stolen from you, they were abandoned, because doubt convinced you that failure was inevitable. But when you see how silence exaggerates imagination, you begin to understand that the monsters in your mind shrink the moment you take action. In a place like Salem County, even the faintest light looks powerful. One spark can cut through an entire forest of shadows. That spark is your decision to take a step, even when fear screams at you to stay still. The darkness might press against your shoulders, whispering memories of everything you've done wrong, but it cannot follow you once you choose movement. You learn that doubt only thrives in motionless minds. The more you act, the weaker it becomes. The more you push forward, the quieter its voice grows. But you must be willing to walk through the discomfort, through the uncertainty, through the very silence that frightens you. That is where transformation begins. In the moment you choose to move despite tremors in your soul, Salem's shadows do not disappear, but your relationship with them changes. Instead of obstacles, they become reminders of everything you've survived, and everything you're capable of becoming. And if you keep walking, if you keep breathing, if you keep choosing courage over comfort, the darkness that once reflected your doubts will eventually reveal something you never expected, the strength that waited for you just beyond your fear. Every abandoned place holds a lesson we're afraid to learn, and in Salem County that truth becomes impossible to ignore. When you step inside one of its forgotten structures, an old farmhouse with peeling wallpaper, a schoolhouse with broken desks, a factory where rust drips like dried blood, you don't just see decay, you see the story of what happens when something is left unattended for too long. Dreams work the same way. Goals work the same way. The parts of yourself you promised to build, strengthen, or repair fall into the same quiet disrepair when you neglect them. These abandoned rooms whisper warnings about what happens when you stop showing up for your own life. They show you how quickly purpose can rot when it isn't fed with effort, how easily potential collapses when you stop reinforcing it with discipline. Walking deeper into these forgotten structures, you feel the air grow heavier, as though the walls themselves remember every unfinished plan and every broken promise. The silence around you carries an eerie familiarity, because it echoes the silence you keep around the things you fear confronting, the talents you've ignored, the opportunities you let slip, the versions of yourself you never allowed to exist. You brush your hand along the dusty railing of a staircase that leads nowhere, and suddenly you realize how many times you climbed halfway towards something you wanted, and then stopped. Something scared you. Something whispered that you weren't ready. Something convinced you that turning back was safer than pushing ahead. And now, looking at the remnants of what once was sturdy and alive, you understand that abandoned dreams don't just disappear. They linger, they decay, and they haunt you until you face them. The abandoned places of Salem County feel alive, because they hold the energy of unfinished stories, and you start to see your own reflection in that emptiness. You remember the projects you started with excitement, but never completed. The habits you planned to build, but dropped after the first challenge. The moments you gave up, because progress didn't come fast enough. These structures aren't scary because they're ruined. They're scary because they show you the outcome of neglect. They remind you that if you leave your goals unattended long enough, they stop feeling possible. If you leave your dreams in silence too long, they stop calling your name. And if you leave your ambition without nourishment, it withers until all that remains is the ghost of the person you were meant to become. As you move from room to room, you start to feel something shift. Not fear, but responsibility. You realize that these abandoned places are not warnings of danger. They are invitations to rebuild. They challenge you to imagine what would happen if you returned to your own neglected foundations. They ask what your life would look like if you cleared away the dust, repaired the cracks, and reignited what once mattered to you. Every loose floorboard becomes a reminder that your path might feel unstable at times, but instability is not a reason to quit. It's a reason to strengthen your footing. Every shattered window becomes a symbol that your perspective might have been broken before, but broken perspectives can be reshaped once you choose to look again. The smell of damp wood becomes a reminder that even if something has been left behind for years, restoration is always possible when you're willing to do the work. You begin to sense that abandoned places are not symbols of failure. They're symbols of what happens when you stop believing in your ability to continue. And yet, here in Salem County, even the darkest, most forgotten spaces still hold a spark of life. A small beam of light sneaks through a cracked ceiling. A single leaf grows between slabs of cement. A faint breeze pushes open a warped door, as if urging you to step through. These small signs whisper a truth more powerful than the fear that brought you here. Nothing is ever too far gone as long as you're willing to return to it. The abandoned places become teachers, showing you that your growth depends on how honestly you face what you once walked away from. You might be scared of what you'll find when you revisit an old dream. Disappointment, regret, reminders of past failures. But fear is not a reason to stay away. Fear is the proof that something inside those ruins still matters to you. And just like Salem's forgotten structures, your potential doesn't die when you ignore it. It waits. It waits for you to stop running. It waits for you to open the door again. It waits for you to decide that rebuilding, even slowly, even imperfectly, is better than letting the most important parts of your life collapse in silence. Courage begins when the silence becomes unbearable. And in Salem County, that silence wraps around you like a presence with weight, a force that presses against your ribs until you feel your pulse echo in your ears. It's the kind of silence that doesn't feel natural, the kind that seems to watch you, study you, wait for you to reveal who you truly are. At first, the quiet is unsettling because it strips away everything you use to distract yourself. No voices, no traffic, no hum of life beyond the trees. Just you. Just your breathing. Just your fears rising to the surface, because there's nothing left to drown them out. And that's where courage is born, not in the absence of fear, but in the moment fear becomes so loud, so undeniable, that you can no longer hide from it. In the dark corners of Salem County, where old barns creak even without wind and rusted chains sway like something unseen brushed past them, you begin to realize that most people never confront themselves deeply enough to find courage. They stay busy. They stay comfortable. They stay numb. But here, in the quiet, you're forced to listen to the thoughts you avoid. The doubts that whisper you're not good enough. The regrets of things you never started. The memories of moments you failed and convinced yourself not to try again. The silence becomes a mirror reflecting everything you pretend isn't there. And as unsettling as that reflection is, it also becomes a turning point, because nothing motivates transformation more than the realization that staying the same is more terrifying than change. As you walk deeper into the county, the silence begins to shift. It doesn't fade, it tightens like a rope drawing you toward a decision. Every crunch of gravel under your feet echoes like a question. Why are you still holding back? What are you waiting for? Who would you be if you finally stepped toward what scares you? The stillness of the place forces clarity. You understand that fear never truly leaves. It follows you, lingers in the corners of your choices, waits for the moment you hesitate. But when silence grows so suffocating that it exposes your oldest insecurities, courage becomes your only escape. Not bravery that roars, but bravery that whispers, yes, I'm scared, and I'm moving anyway. Courage isn't born in comfort, it's born in pressure. The same way the darkness in Salem County seems heavier the longer you stay. Your internal pressure grows the longer you avoid your purpose, and at some point, you reach a breaking point. You realize the silence isn't just around you, it's inside you. It's the silence of unspoken dreams, of words you never said, of actions you never took. It's the silence of a life lived too carefully, too safely, too quietly. And suddenly, that silence becomes intolerable. It becomes the thing you can no longer endure. That's when courage sparks, not because you're fearless, but because staying frozen feels like a slow death. Standing in an empty field, the fog stretching across cracked earth like pale fingers, you start to understand that courage is a choice, a movement. It doesn't come from waiting until you feel ready. It comes from stepping forward precisely when you don't. You take action not because the fear disappears, but because the silence of inaction threatens to consume you. The ghost stories of Salem aren't about creatures lurking in the shadows. They're metaphors for the parts of yourself you've abandoned. The ambitions that haunt you when you lie awake at night. And the only way to silence them is to face them. To bring them back into the light by choosing movement over paralysis. The deeper you go into the county, the more the atmosphere changes. The silence stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like an invitation. You begin to hear your heartbeat not as a sign of fear, but as a sign of life, a reminder that you're capable of more than you've allowed yourself to believe. That pounding in your chest becomes a message. Keep going, keep pushing, keep choosing to move even when every step feels uncertain. The courage rising in you isn't loud or dramatic. It feels like a steady flame, small but unextinguishable, forcing back the cold edges of the dark. And as you walk, as the silence presses and your courage grows, you realize something powerful. Courage never arrives fully formed. It builds, it strengthens, it expands. Each step you take becomes defiance against the fear that once ruled you. Each breath becomes reclaiming. Each moment becomes proof that you don't need the world to give you permission to rise. The silence that once frightened you becomes the catalyst that wakes you up, forcing you to choose between staying frozen or stepping into the unknown. And slowly, with every forward movement, courage becomes not just something you feel, but something you are.